water that's in the earth. 96.5% of all the water, though, is in our oceans, and so we can't really drink it. Although 0.9% of the water is saline or other saline water, so it's brackish water, water that is kind of salty but also a little bit fresh, and then 2.5% of all the water on our planet is considered to be fresh. Of that 2.5%, 68% of that is frozen in a glacier or an ice cap. Then 30.1 and 1.2%, which gives us 31.3% total, is found groundwater and surface and other fresh water. If you just take that surface and other fresh water and go over here, 69% of that is found in the ground as ice and permafrost. Permafrost is areas that have a north enough latitude, or they're far north or far south enough so that the ground itself, even in the summertime, doesn't get warm enough to thaw, and so the ice stays there. And then this very small fraction of a fraction of a fraction is actually the water that we can drink. Now, what I want you to see from this is that there is water all over the planet, but it's something that we need to conserve and we need to use wisely. That'll come in at the end when we're talking about human impacts on water. Here's just kind of a recap of the water cycle. This is a lovely image from the U.S. Geological Society. I want you to understand that there are large bodies of water that are interconnected with each other, both through groundwater movement. As water's coming through here, you can have water going into larger bodies on land, creating freshwater storage areas. Then you can also have fresh water moving from these larger bodies of water connecting to the oceans through streams, rivers, tributaries, other things like that. You can then also have the water evaporating out of these large bodies of water and then going into the sky, condensing, and then falling as precipitation. These can then become, they fall as snow, ice, snow, rain, sleet, or hail, and they can freeze into glaciers and then get stuck or then melt again and return back to those freshwater storage areas. So this is a little bit of how large bodies of water can be interconnected throughout the water cycle. Now, take a little break here. I want you to fill in the first two parts of your notes. These are on page 106. That's for school year 2014-2015. And so in these notes, you'll find these in the blue crate. If you missed class there, I can distinguish how bodies of water are interconnected and how water transfers throughout the planet, aka the water cycle. Now that you've filled in those first two objectives on your notes, I want you to take these two words and I want you to put them at the top of your notes: infiltration and percolation. Now, infiltration is when you have water that is on the surface of land and it's just starting to go under the surface of the ground. Then percolation is actually when that water is filtering through the ground itself. So you can see here in the image how water is falling on the ground. Infiltration again is happening up here. Percolation is happening down here. So now you may be thinking, all right, so if the water's going through the ground, isn't it just going to get more dirty, Mr. Volts? But no, that's not really the case. So as water filters or percolates through the ground, once it infiltrates and then percolates, it will move through different layers of earth, and that includes sand and gravel and rock, and all the dirt and debris that's in the water is naturally going to get filtered out through that. Now, as the water then gets down deep enough, it will be considered groundwater. And what I want you to understand is that many of you who have your own wells at home, groundwater is what is pumped up to the surface if you have a well, and that's used when fresh water is needed. Now, I want you to understand from this illustration that groundwater is not in an underwater lake. It is not an open cavern underground where you have a bunch of water sitting. That's a really common misconception. If you've ever been to a beach before and you've taken your hands in the sand and dug a little hole and then all of a sudden that hole fills up with water, that's because the water that's underground is really close to the surface of the ground. And so groundwater that you're pumping out of the ground at your house is very similar to that. And instead of being in an under cavern lake, you can imagine it like this image right here with little pieces of sand and dirt, and then you have water that is in between all those little pieces. Now, forgive my drawing. I know that it doesn't do this concept justice, but this is more of how groundwater actually is in our ground. Alright, I want you to take a moment right now and fill in this part of your notes. I can describe how the water cycle naturally purifies water. Just pause this video and fill that in your notes. Now for this last part, we're going to talk just really briefly about how human interactions affect fresh water supplies. Now, last week we did an activity where we were creating our own watersheds, and then I came around and I polluted your watershed with that bright red sticker, and I maybe said that a gas tank leaked, or you had an oil spill, or you had a waste dump that was accidentally releasing its water into the water supply. All of these things are because of human interactions, because of different things that we're doing, that we are interacting with the freshwater supplies. And so at times things will get into our fresh water and they become unusable until they're filtered out. And I want you to think about different kinds of things that can be released into water that would make it no longer usable. I want you to just take a moment to think about that. So now thinking about how humans interact with the water cycle, and also how we may interfere with these processes through pollution and through other factors, because keep in mind we are also always taking in water and using it for many different things. I want you to fill in that fourth and final part of your notes, and I want you to specifically talk about how we interact with the water cycle and how we may possibly interfere with some of the natural processes of water evaporating and then being filtered as it goes through the ground. And when you're done with that, please do the homework, which was a summary, 5 sentences of these notes, 4 questions, and then I also had you do an adult input for these notes. Those are separate stamps, so you'll get 1 stamp for the adult input and 1 stamp for the summary and questions, for a total of 10 points for this week. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a great one. Bye-bye.